For those that may not know, an alternate reality game, or ARG, is pretty much a type of interactable game that uses the real world and/or the internet as a platform to tell some kind of story or narrative in real time that can be unraveled through the means of solving puzzles and other types of challenges. Whenever some form of end or conclusion is eventually reached, a prize or piece of special information will also sometimes be revealed to the players of the game as a reward for all their effort. But that brings up the question of what if there was a My Little Pony ARG? Well, there actually are quite a few of them, but I thought it would be fun if I were to take a look at what is probably the most obscure one out of the bunch. One that took place well over a decade ago back in late 2011. One that seems to have been almost completely forgotten and swept away by the tides of time. The game that you are currently watching gameplay footage of is a My Little Pony Flash game called Super Pinkie World 2. As you can probably tell, it is a relatively simple platformer inspired by games like Super Mario World for the SNES. It features the pony Pinkie Pie as the only playable character, and it was released to DeviantArt on November 5th, 2011 by a Pony Flash game developer called Certainty Principle. Before Super Pinkie World 2, Certainty Principle had released a few other MLP Flash games to DeviantArt the month prior in October. Those games are Pinkie Jump, Spitfire vs. the Shadow Boats, and the original Super Pinkie World. All installments of the Super Pinkie World games by Certainty Principle follow the same simple format of having to beat 10 separate levels in order to finish the game. However, Super Pinkie World 2 in particular is special. Firstly, because it introduced a new password box feature where you could warp to specific levels by inputting a special code revealed to you at the end of each level. And secondly, because whenever you fail a level, in the bottom right hand corner of the game over screen, you can see Pinkie Pie, or rather Pinkamena, looking like a bit of a goofy goober. And by the way, if you're unaware, Pinkamena is basically a fan-created, psychotic and violent version of Pinkie Pie that initially became quite popular in the MLP fandom back in the early to mid-2010s. The reason for its existence and popularity can mainly be attributed to the infamous grimdark fanfiction Cupcakes, which was first posted on 4chan in January of 2011 by the user Sergeant Sprinkles, after he had decided to see what it would be like if Pinkie was secretly a serial killer that attacked her friends. Pinkamena and Cupcakes in general may be referenced a few times throughout this video, so it might be helpful to keep that info in mind. Anyways, back to the Pinkamena on the game over screen. Now, if you were to drag your cursor over to Pinkamena, you would find out that she can be clicked on. So, let's see what happens. Warning, there is going to be a flatline beep sound played in a few moments. So, yeah. As you can see, immediately after you click on Pinkamena, a message saying "I will show you such pretty things" appears for about a second, and you suddenly get transported to an almost empty level entitled Level 0. It goes without saying that Level 0 is quite different from all of the other levels in the game. The background is completely bright red, while the floor is black. You have far more health than normal, and the rest of the main 6 are oddly lined up in front of Pinkamena. If you control her to move towards them, they start to bizarrely turn into clones of Pinkamena, and your score will gradually increase in increments of 133.2 until it becomes 666. And by the way, yeah, I know the whole 666 thing is very cheesy, but come on, it was 2011, just bear with me, okay? Once you are finished turning all of the other main 6 into Pinkamena, the red background begins to slowly consume the black floor until the game suddenly cuts to a completely black screen with a flatline beep noise being played. Now, at this point, there's nothing else you can do here as the game stays on this screen indefinitely until you decide to just manually restart it and go back to the main menu. And yes, I know what some of you watching might be thinking now. Okay, TobbyMLP, this does seem a bit out of the ordinary and peculiar, but isn't this basically just nothing but a cheesy Easter egg referencing a grimdark fanfiction placed in some random 2011 pony flash game? And truthfully, I don't blame you whatsoever for thinking that, because that's pretty much what everybody else also thought when this was first discovered by DeviantArt users in the comment section a few hours after the game had released. It was all simply just an Easter egg put into the game by its developer as a relatively harmless joke meant to scare some unexpected players. Under normal circumstances, I would end the video right here, and you would hopefully go outside to touch some grass or something. However, a small handful of people decided to continue snooping around the game. Because, well, after all, if there was one Easter egg, then who's to say that there weren't more Easter eggs just waiting to be discovered? This specific search would actually end empty-handed. However, a few people would eventually return back to the level 0 secret in order to see if they had potentially glossed over any important details. Oh, the health. It was discovered that if you were to input the exact number shown in the health score into the password box over on the title screen of the game, it would take you to this screen. As you can probably tell, it's out of the ordinary for various reasons. There's text saying almost there, you are ill, and there's also other smaller pieces of seemingly random nonsensical text, like the phrase "stop looking at me" repeated several times. Once this hidden screen was found and discussed in the comment section of the game on DeviantArt, Super Pinkie World 2's developer, Certainty Principle, decided to quietly update the game without telling anyone in order to change the previously mentioned screen to this. It is more or less the same as before, but with most of the text having been adjusted or removed. Most notably, however, after the update, it was discovered that if you pressed Ctrl+A on your keyboard to highlight all of the text in the window you were using to play the game, this deliberately hidden string of letters and numbers would show up. So, what the hell does this string of text mean? Well, as some of you may have already guessed, it is a code. To be specific, it is base 64 code. An encoding scheme that represents binary data by using an ASCII string format. Once this code was fed through an online base 64 decoder, it led to a rapid share URL, where you once could have downloaded a file entitled password.wav. Now, before I continue on, there is something important I believe I should clarify at this point. Due to the fact that this ARG is over a decade old and some portions of it not being archived or documented properly, most of the downloadable files related to this ARG, like password.wav, are pretty much considered lost to time. Rapid Share as a service shut down in 2015, and all of the other once available mirrors of these files are also no longer working. So the point I'm trying to make is that maybe all of these files are still on some brony's ancient hard drive from 2011, but for me at least, they are effectively unattainable. And it certainly doesn't help that Adobe ended support for Adobe Flash Player back in 2020, which means that all of the games that Certainty Principle uploaded to DeviantArt are completely unplayable, unless you directly download the .swf files and load them into a Flash emulator. So that being said, if I talk about something like a certain file and I don't actually show it on screen, that's why. You'll just kind of have to take my word for it, okay? But anyways, back to the ARG. Apparently, once the password.wav file was opened, the audio that would play was nothing but random nonsensical noise. However, thanks to the Equestria Daily user, the guy159, it was quickly found out that if you put the files through a spectrum analyzer, which is something that basically just analyzes sound by using audio frequencies, an image of a number 3 would show up. After this discovery, it wasn't made immediately clear to those beginning to look into this ARG what exactly they should be doing next. But after a little brainstorming, another clue was eventually found. On the previously mentioned hidden screen, the word almost in almost there is coincidentally also the password used to skip to the 10th and final level of the game. And so, a few people thought that it would be worth it to begin poking around level 10 to see if they could unearth anything interesting. This little search would pay off in the end, as it was found that if you pressed the number on your keyboard that was shown in the spectrogram of password.wav from earlier, which was 3 while you were specifically playing on the 10th level, you would suddenly be taken to a second secret level entitled Level J. As you can probably tell, Level J bears a pretty close resemblance to the first secret level we saw, Level 0, with theirs still being a red background and whatnot. However, instead of initially seeing any other ponies, we first see Pinkie Pie's inanimate imaginary friends from the MLP Friendship is Magic episode, Party of One, sitting on some chairs. Once we control Pinkamena to slowly trot past them all, we are eventually met with Rainbow Dash. When we finish walking towards her, however, much like in the first secret level, we get met with another sudden black screen accompanied by a flatline beep noise. So, what now? Well, shortly after these new discoveries of Level J and some of the other secrets began to be discussed more in the comment section of the game on DeviantArt, Certainty Principle decided to post an interesting comment, which featured nothing but something that was encoded to decimal code. Once deciphered though, the code led to another rapid share link with a downloadable file in it, which in this case was called euphoria.wav. As far as I can tell, euphoria.wav was a relatively short audio file that clocked in at about under a minute in length, and it apparently featured some type of conversation relating to and or about Pinkie Pie, Discord, and Princess Celestia. However, the most notable part of it was at around 18 to 24 seconds in, where some kind of high-pitched, distorted, squeaky noise could apparently be briefly heard. A few hours after euphoria.wav was found though, it was discovered that if the section with the squeaky audio was edited to be slowed down and reversed, a hidden message would be revealed. According to the sources that I could find, the message was seemingly narrated by what is described as a robotic voice, which, if I had to guess, is most likely text-to-speech, and it apparently said, quote, "I have a message for you 139356JX, repeated 3 times in quick succession." So naturally, it was assumed that the set of numbers and letters heard in the narration was something new to input into the password box. And when you do that, the title screen of the game instantly changes to this. Now, there's a few quite interesting things here, but the most notable is this new text that says, "Find me," and the text in the password box which now says, "Help me." For a while after the discovery of the new hidden title screen, there weren't really any helpful pieces of information or hints regarding what exactly should have been done next. But that being said, after about a day of digging around, the DeviantArt user DSMan64 accidentally discovered that Certainty Principle had quietly updated one of their older MLP Flash games earlier in the day. To be precise, it was their very first MLP Flash game, Pinkie Jump. The only noticeable new thing that Certainty Principle had added to Pinkie Jump in the update was a password box to the title screen, which was a bit odd. Mainly because Pinkie Jump as a game only has one single stage in it, so you aren't able to use it to skip to a level or anything. And so, it was presumed that this must have been added here for another reason, and that assumption would be proven correct, as after a little while of trying different passwords to see if anything would pop up, One person found out that if you just input the previous password that was found in euphoria.wav, 139356JX, the entire Pinkie Jump Flash game would abruptly cut to nothing but a bright red screen. At first, people couldn't really tell what this screen entailed, because, at a glance, there doesn't seem to be much that you can do here at all. The entire game is just red. However, it was discovered that if you were to play the game using the desktop Adobe Flash Player program and horizontally stretch the window, an initially out-of-frame black piece of text saying, "You are late," would become viewable. And shortly after this was uncovered, it was also discovered that if the .swf file of the Pinkie Jump game was modified in order to remove the red background, several other pieces of red-colored text initially obscured by the background could be read. There are a few interesting things to be read here, but the most important pieces of text shown are this email address by the name of findme@hotmail.com and a question which asks, quote, "What is the password?" So, with an email address now available to contact, people naturally began to email it in order to see what would happen. Now, unfortunately, I don't have much to say about the emails themselves, because basically none of them were ever actually documented, except for two very short transcripts, which I guess I'll put up on screen now. I won't bother reading them aloud, but basically just know that whoever was on the other side of the email address wanted some type of password to be sent to them before they were willing to disclose or talk about anything. And so, a few people began trying to guess the password. But even after hours of trying, none of their guesses were being accepted by findme@hotmail.com at all. That was the case until the DeviantArt user CanonFile40 came to the realization that if you were to horizontally stretch the window like in Pinkie Jump, but with the secret title screen in Super Pinkie World 2 instead, this piece of text saying "Find me" was actually slightly longer than what was initially shown. And once this longer version of the text was found and sent to findme@hotmail.com, they apparently responded back with nothing, but a single attachment by the name of lament.swf, which was a file of an Adobe Flash animation. Now, unfortunately, much like with a lot of the other stuff here, as far as I can tell, the lament.swf Flash animation was never publicly archived anywhere, so I'm unable to show it here. But hey, at the very least, there does exist a probably accurate short transcript of what happened in the animation itself, which is definitely better than nothing, I guess. The animation apparently started out with Pinkamena together with all of the other ponies that you encounter at the end of each level in the game as she has a conversation with Twilight Sparkle. Pinkamena says, "I am so glad every pony came," and Twilight asks what Pinkie wanted to show her and the rest of the ponies, to which Pinkamena responds with, "Come, I will show you such pretty things." The exact same message that we saw at the very beginning of this ARG during the initial Level 0 secret. Right after she says that though, Pinkamena would apparently begin to slowly trot towards Twilight and the rest of the ponies, before the screen would yet again, for the last time though, abruptly cut to another black screen accompanied by the flatline beep noise. A few hours after the lament.swf Flash animation was first found, Certainty Principle would again create a new post in the comments of the Super Pinkie World 2 game on DeviantArt. The only words in Certainty Principle's new comment were, "This is the end." So, if that's the end of this alternate reality game, then what was the point of it? What does it all even mean? Well, from a narrative perspective at least, I believe that a rough timeline of events can be pieced together. It all starts with the normal Pinkie Pie that we all know going throughout the levels of the game in order to gather and or maybe save all of the other ponies from various different locations. If you manage to successfully beat the game by getting to level 10 without failing a stage, then everything turns out fine. Pinkie and her friends go out and sing a song about the magic of friendship or something. However, if you are to fail a level in the game because you were too distracted by blasting early 2010s dubstep out of your speakers, then it can be assumed that Pinkie Pie basically dies, and is consequently somehow replaced by Pinkamena, who is, not so nice to put it lightly. After that, the events of the Lament.swf flash animation transpire, with Pinkamena and Twilight Sparkle having a conversation about something that Pinkamena wanted to show her and the rest of the ponies. Pinkamena then says the whole "I will show you such pretty things" stuff, and then it can be assumed that the events of the original secret level, Level 0, begin to take place, wherein you, the player, control Pinkamena as she turns the rest of the main 6 into clones of herself in order to, well, show them such pretty things, I guess. Which is probably meant to be interpreted as Pinkie Pie, or now Pinkamena, for the lack of a better way to put it, pretty much killing all of her friends. Well, that's pretty much all that there is to talk about for this ARG. Despite the narrative and meaning of it all sort of being left somewhat ambiguous and up in the air, I still thought there were definitely some fairly interesting ideas and whatnot presented here, especially with stuff like the secret in-game levels and themes relating to the Cupcakes fanfiction. Though that being said, I do want to point out that this ARG certainly does have its flaws. The most notable problem with it, I think, is probably how kinda unfulfilling it all slightly feels in general. It just sort of ends with no type of explanation or answer as to what was actually ever going on, which to a certain extent makes it all feel a bit underwhelming. And additionally, an argument could be made that it also falls into several cliches and overdone tropes of alternate reality games in general. Like, look at the spooky encoded numbers. This is so mysterious and hard to decipher. It's totally not like I can just quickly identify what code it is, and then use an online decoder to find out what it says within the span of 40 seconds or anything. And it's also worth noting that even in terms of alternate reality games specifically about My Little Pony, there are several far more in-depth and thought-provoking ones out there to be discussed. However, that all being said, like I mentioned in the title and beginning of this video, this whole Super Pinkie World 2 ARG about Pinkie killing her friends is more or less completely forgotten. From what I can tell, it hasn't been discussed anywhere publicly on the internet in years. And basically all of my research that made this video even possible came from only a few posts from 2011 on websites like Reddit and Equestria Daily. The point I'm trying to make is that the story of this whole Pony Flash game ARG was effectively doomed to a fate of obscurity, and while it obviously isn't the most remarkable or noteworthy piece of MLP fan content out there, it remaining forgotten still would have sucked in my opinion. Because on a meta level, its creator, Certainty Principle, probably put a decent chunk of time and effort into making it all a reality. And plus, to a certain extent at least, it's also effectively a small time capsule of the MLP fandom back in 2011. I mean, think about it for a moment. The game itself is a Pony Flash game hosted on goddamn DeviantArt, and it literally has an entire secret Easter egg and ARG dedicated entirely to Pinkamena from the Cupcakes creepypasta / fanfiction. If that sentence doesn't absolutely scream of the My Little Pony fandom from the early to mid 2010s, then I legitimately don't know what will. But yeah, that's all I've really got left to say now. This My Little Pony fangame ARG about Pinkie Pie isn't the greatest thing ever, but in my book at least, I would say it's still a pretty interesting lesser known piece of history in the fandom, and it certainly doesn't deserve to be something that only lives on through the vague memories of those who originally experienced it back in 2011. So, thanks for watching. Oh well, would you look at that, you've reached the end of the video. So, if you enjoyed listening to some dude talk about an almost 11-year-old My Little Pony alternate reality game, then do all of the normal things you're supposed to do after watching a video you enjoyed. Like, comment, share it around. Play the video on 72 separate devices so my watch time gets artificially jacked up. You know, all the normal stuff. All jokes aside though, hope you enjoyed this video. It's just a little something I thought would be nice to make for October, as it's the time of spooky ghosts and skeletons or whatever. I'm going to go now though, because I need to touch some grass and make a new post about Starlight Glimmer, all the usual stuff, you know? So, see you all whenever I see you.